I don't usually get sentimental about Christmas, but I do have one rule. If I make it to the 24th of December without being roped into carol singing, church services, or somebody's bright idea of a Christmas office party, then the year has been a success. Unfortunately, this Christmas Eve, that success lasted exactly 7 minutes. Here's what happened. Fritz came out of the kitchen carrying the breakfast tray, and there was no butter. No butter on the table. No butter on the tray. No butter anywhere in the vicinity of Nero Wolfe's favorite ritual, the morning feast that could make or break the day's sanity. I don't pretend to know what effect a missing stick of butter has on the world's natural order, but in the Wolfe household it's roughly the equivalent of a 9.0 earthquake. Archie, Wolfe's voice rumbled from the dining room doorway, and he was scowling with the kind of gravity he usually reserves for government men and tax notices. Fritz informs me that the butter, which he set out last night in the pantry, has disappeared. Maybe Santa Claus got hungry on the way to Macy's parade. I pulled out my notebook and gave it a flip. I'll take a statement from the jam jar, then we'll haul the pepper grinder downtown for questioning. Pfui, Wolfe growled, lowering himself into the chair with the delicacy of a bear easing onto thin ice. I detest levity when the circumstances are irregular. Fine, but I'm telling you it's butter, not a dead body. Not yet, Fritz muttered in that soft accent of his. He looked more flustered than I'd seen him in months. Fritz usually handled crises with the serenity of a Benedictine monk. If the missing butter had him rattled, then maybe it was worth penciling into the ledger of odd events. I didn't get to argue further because the bell rang. That bell, at 9:18 a.m. on Christmas Eve, which is a time of year when no one visits unless they're selling mistletoe or looking for a last-minute shoulder to cry on. I strolled to the door, figuring it might be a delivery boy with a package Wolfe didn't order and wouldn't want, but when I opened it, a woman stepped in without invitation. She was wrapped in a dark green coat trimmed with fake white fur, her cheeks red from the cold, and her gloved hands clutching a square brown parcel as if it might explode. "Is this the residence of Mr. Nero Wolfe?" she demanded, her breath clouding in the entryway. Depends who's asking. If you're the ghost of Christmas past, he's not home. If you're the ghost of Christmas present, you've got the wrong address. If you're the ghost of Christmas future, you can come in, but no scythes on the carpet. She didn't laugh. Not even a flicker. She stepped past me like she had a warrant. "It's urgent." That word has its own smell. Urgent is code for drop what you're doing, Archie, and get ready to run around town while Wolfe stays cozy in his chair. I didn't like the whiff of it. I escorted her to the office, where Wolfe was sitting behind his desk with his lips set in a line that suggested the butter incident had not improved his holiday cheer. The woman set the parcel on the desk. "This must not fall into the wrong hands." I opened my mouth to wisecrack, but closed it when I caught Wolfe's expression. His brows had gone up 1/8 of an inch, which in his language was the equivalent of a triple somersault. "Madam," Wolfe leaned back and clasped his hands over his vast middle. "What precisely is the nature of your imposition?" She peeled off her gloves slowly, like she was trying to delay the answer. Finally, she said, "My name is Constance Fraser. I'm the secretary to Mr. David Mercer of Mercer and Hobb, the investment firm." I gave her a small nod. Mercer and Hobb was known uptown as a fortress of money and downtown as a feeding ground for taxmen. "Mr. Mercer has been receiving threats," she continued. "Anonymous letters. Last night," she tapped the parcel. "This arrived at his townhouse. He insisted it be destroyed, but I feared destruction would only increase the danger. I persuaded him to let me bring it here instead. Mr. Wolfe, I beg you to take the case." Wolfe squinted at the package. "And what is contained therein?" "I haven't looked." That made me snort. "You carried a package across town on Christmas Eve, claimed it was dangerous, and didn't even peek. Lady, if it were me, I'd have had it unwrapped before the elevator doors closed." Her chin lifted. "I was instructed not to open it." "By whom?" Wolfe asked. She hesitated. By Mr. Mercer himself. Wolfe gestured with one finger. I picked up the parcel carefully, noting the weight. 2 pounds, maybe, dense but not bulky. Brown paper, tied with twine, edges neat. No address, no stamps, just the thing itself. Mr. Goodwin, Wolfe said, be so kind as to sever the cord. Sure, I said, though I wasn't thrilled. If it started ticking, I'd be the first to know. I pulled out my penknife and sliced through the twine. The paper fell away to reveal a small wooden box, dark oak, polished, with a brass latch. I flipped the latch open. Inside lay a single object, an old-fashioned fountain pen. Black barrel, gold nib, the kind you'd see in a lawyer's vest pocket circa 1910. A pen, I said. We're risking butter shortages and holiday spirit for a pen. Mrs. Fraser's face went pale. That's not just any pen. It belonged to Mr. Mercer's late partner, Jonathan Hobb. He died 20 years ago, on Christmas Eve. That silenced even me for a second. Wolfe's gaze, however, was steady and unimpressed. A trifle sentimental. No, she said urgently. Not sentimental. Cursed. Every Christmas Eve since his death, someone has sent Mr. Mercer a reminder of Jonathan Hobb. A letter, a token, a threat. But never, never the pen itself. I glanced at Wolfe, waiting for him to laugh her out the door. Instead, he reached forward, gingerly lifted the pen, and studied it as though it might whisper secrets. It is possible, he murmured, that you are the herald of nonsense. Yet nonsense, when it persists, often conceals a kernel of design. I raised a brow. Translation? You're not throwing her out. I am not yet persuaded, Wolfe replied, setting the pen down. But I am curious. Mrs. Fraser clutched her gloves tighter. Then you'll take the case? Wolfe closed his eyes as if the butterless breakfast had returned to torment him. I will consider it. I leaned against the desk, twirling the penknife. Lady, for Wolfe, that's practically a signed contract. Just then, Fritz appeared in the doorway, looking as pale as Mrs. Fraser. He held out a small white envelope. Mr. Wolfe, this was slipped under the kitchen door while I was fetching coffee. Wolfe frowned, took the envelope, and opened it. Inside was a single slip of paper with 4 words written in neat black ink. I don't like notes that show up uninvited in the kitchen. In our line of work, notes slipped under doors usually come in 2 flavors, the desperate plea and the anonymous threat. This one, with its 4 tidy words, "Tonight the truth returns," landed squarely in the second category. I was watching Wolfe's face for signs of what he thought about it. He has a whole dictionary of eyebrow shifts and chin angles that could put a poker dealer out of business. This time, his right eyebrow moved half a centimeter north, which is Wolfe's equivalent of yelling, "Good heavens, Archie, we've stumbled into a nest of vipers." "Archie," he said, and handed me the slip. "Observe the handwriting." I did. Neat cursive, a touch old-fashioned, like someone's grandmother who'd had her Palmer method lessons beaten into her with a ruler. The ink was black, crisp, and identical to what was in the box with the pen. "Looks like Cousin Jonathan rose from the grave with his trusty fountain pen," I said. Wolfe grunted. "Balderdash. But deliberate balderdash." Mrs. Fraser's hands fluttered at her sides. "You see, Mr. Wolfe, this is exactly why I came. Every year the threats escalate. This is the worst yet. Tonight something will happen." "That," Wolfe said, shutting his eyes, "is possible. But why must I be vexed with it? What compels Mr. Mercer to suppose his safety or the sanctity of his partner's pen is my concern." "Because," she said, her voice trembling, "the police won't take it seriously. Inspector Kramer says it's seasonal nonsense. But if something happens tonight and I did nothing—" "Kramer's instincts," Wolfe cut in, "are generally wrong-headed, yet in this case I sympathize. Nonsense is abundant." I cleared my throat. "Wolfe, with all respect, we've got a live woman. in a green coat telling us her boss is about to get a Christmas Eve haunting, and somebody slipped a note under our kitchen door while Fritz was wrestling with the butter crisis. That's not coincidence. Somebody's been casing the place. Fritz gave a small, mournful nod, like I'd just sentenced him to dishwashing purgatory. Wolfe opened his eyes again and fixed me with a stare. You're disposed to dramatize, Archie. That note could have been inserted at any point this morning. Then explain how it's in the same ink as Grandpa Hobbs' magic pen, unless you think our mystery Santa broke in just to autograph his stationery. Mrs. Fraser leaned forward, clutching the edge of Wolfe's desk. Please, Mr. Wolfe, if you won't do it for Mr. Mercer, do it for me. I'm frightened. That did it. Wolfe can ignore money, authority, or the prospect of social obligation. What he can't ignore, at least not entirely, is a woman trembling in his office, looking like a Christmas goose had sprouted horns. He sighed, the kind of sigh that suggested another man might be breaking rocks on a chain gang. Very well, I will permit Mr. Mercer to call upon me this afternoon. Archie, telephone him. I nodded, already heading to the desk for the directory. Mrs. Fraser sagged into the red leather chair across from Wolfe's like she'd just dropped a 20-pound sack. While I was dialing Mercer and Hobb, Wolfe turned the pen over in his fingers again, inspecting it like it might confess a crime. And you, madam, must leave the pen here. Her eyes widened. Leave it, but do you wish it to vanish a second time? She bit her lip, but nodded reluctantly. The operator connected me, and after a few rounds with secretaries who had voices sharp enough to slice ribbon candy, I finally got David Mercer himself. He was brisk, irritated, and clearly not happy about being interrupted on Christmas Eve. But when I mentioned Wolfe, his tone dropped half a notch. Not warmer, exactly. More like frost instead of ice. Tell Mr. Wolfe, he said, that if he wants to waste his holiday with old legends, I'll arrive at 3 o'clock, but I won't pay him a dime. I relayed this. Wolfe's lips compressed, but he nodded. So be it. When I hung up, Mrs. Fraser rose. Thank you, Mr. Wolfe. Thank you, Mr. Goodwin. You won't regret this. I showed her to the door, though I doubted Wolfe agreed about the regret part. When I got back to the office, Wolfe was already signaling me with a lazy wave of his hand. Archie, before we permit Mr. Mercer to contaminate my afternoon, certain inquiries are necessary. Call Saul Panzer. Tell him I want background, Mercer, Fraser, and the late Jonathan Hobb, particularly their personal entanglements. I grinned. Saul's going to love you for calling him on Christmas Eve. Saul, Wolfe said, loves money. I put in the call. Saul's voice was its usual deadpan, and he didn't argue. He just grunted when I passed along the names, then said, Give me 3 hours. I'll call back before Mercer shows. That taken care of, I turned back to Wolfe. Now what? Do we sit here staring at the pen until it leaks secrets? No, Wolfe said. We wait. That was Wolfe in a nutshell. Genius, stubbornness, and a philosophy of waiting that could outlast stone. The waiting, however, didn't last long. At 11 sharp, the bell rang again. This time it was Inspector Kramer, shoulders dusted with snow, cigar already going like he'd chewed through half a dozen suspects since breakfast. He stomped into the office without invitation, sniffed the air, and scolded. Wolfe, what the devil is this about Mercer calling me, ranting that his secretary ran off with a box and took it to you? I leaned against the wall. Inspector, good to see you too. Merry Christmas. Shut up, Goodwin. He swung back to Wolfe. I told Mercer this whole curse of Jonathan Hobb thing is baloney. Now you're sticking your nose in and making it worse. Wolfe didn't move. Baloney or not, Inspector, the threats have escalated. A note was deposited here this morning. Kramer blinked. Here, at your house. I handed it over. He read it, muttered something about cranks, and jammed it in his pocket. If you ask me, Mercer's making his own trouble. Man like him collects enemies like a snowdrift collects soot. But if somebody's playing games, I don't want you two stoking it. Pwah, Wolfe said. It stokes itself. Kramer jabbed the cigar in Wolfe's direction. If this turns into another circus, I'll... He broke off, scowling harder. Damn it, I don't have time for this. Keep out of it, Wolfe, you hear me? Your admonitions, Wolfe said, are noted and disregarded. Kramer stomped out, muttering curses that would have gotten him coal in his stocking. As the door closed, I let out a low whistle. Well, that's a nice prelude. Butter goes missing, cursed pens arrive, ladies in green coats beg for help, and Kramer comes by to bark at us, all before lunch. Archie. Wolfe leaned back, steepled his fingers, and gave me the kind of look that usually precedes long hours of legwork for me. Attend closely. This is not merely an eccentricity of Yuletide. It is design. Tonight, something will occur, and we must be prepared. I opened my mouth to ask what exactly we were preparing for, but the phone rang. I picked it up, expecting Saul. It wasn't Saul, it was a man's voice, low and hurried. Tell Wolfe he'll regret opening that box. Tonight, he'll pay for it. Then the line went dead. When a man calls to threaten your boss, hangs up before you can say, wrong number, and leaves your ear buzzing like a beehive, you don't just hang up and shrug. Not if you're Archie Goodwin. I stayed with the receiver in my hand for a second, weighing whether to slam it down for dramatic effect or just lower it gently. I went with gentle. Wolfe hates noise. Somebody with a talent for telephone manners, I told Wolfe. He says you'll regret opening the box. Tonight, you'll pay for it. Fritz gasped from the doorway. Wolfe, however, barely twitched. He just reached for his beer glass and took a sip as if the call had been about an overdue subscription. Describe the voice, Wolfe ordered. Male, mid-range, maybe 40, give or take. Not hoarse, not polished. No accent worth writing home about. Sounded nervous, though he tried to fake menace. Wolfe grunted. Imitative. He mimicked menace, but it was not native to him. He fears. That makes two of us, Fritz murmured, and disappeared to the kitchen like butter was still missing, and it was his personal sin. I put the receiver back and dropped into my chair. So now we've got two threats in one morning, one note and one call, both tied to the box. I'm beginning to think your Christmas is going to be heavier on the conspiracy and lighter on the brandy. Archie, Wolfe said, eyes closed. Fetch me the pen again. I set the box on his desk, opened it, and placed the fountain pen in front of him. He examined it, rotating it slowly until finally he murmured, Observe the nib. Ink residue. Old. This pen has been used recently, but the style is antiquated. Which means what? That someone intended it to be noticed. Someone who wishes Mercer to remember the deceased Mr. Hobb, not merely in sentiment, but in symbol. Symbols are the refuge of manipulators. I leaned back. Fine. Then we should start figuring out which manipulators are on Mercer's Christmas card list. Wolfe was about to reply when the phone rang again. I shot a look at Wolfe. He waved a finger, so I picked it up. This time, it was Saul Panzer. Archie, I've got some background for you. Shoot. David Mercer, age 58, married once, widower. Built Mercer and Hobb into one of the city's wealthier firms. Reputation for ruthlessness, not universally liked. Saul's tone suggested understatement. Constance Fraser's been his secretary 10 years. No scandals attached. Loyal type, by all accounts. And Hobb? Jonathan Hobb. Died 20 years ago, Christmas Eve. Heart attack in his office. Rumors say Mercer and Hobb had a falling out before then, but nothing substantiated. Hobb was more conservative with money. Mercer was aggressive. Some old associates believed Mercer pushed Hobb too hard. Anyone still alive who remembers that fight? Plenty, One name stood out, Leonard Cutler, former clerk at Mercer and Hobb back then. Runs a stationery shop on 9th Avenue now. Stationery, I repeated. As in pens, paper, ink? Exactly. And he still talks about how Mercer ruined Hobb's health. Grudge hasn't cooled. Got it. Anything else? Yeah, Mercer's been in financial trouble the last year. Risky deals, and some investors are pulling out. He's desperate. I thanked Saul and hung up. Wolfe opened one eye. Well, I summarized, making sure to linger on the detail about Cutler and his stationery shop. Wolfe's lips pursed. A man who harbors grudges and sells ink, a combination not to be dismissed. Want me to pay him a visit? Indeed. But later. First, Mercer arrives at 3. His account may illuminate the obscurities. I stood. Fine. I'll stretch my legs, check the street, make sure our door isn't about to be graced by more mystery packages. It turned out to be a good move. Outside, the city was buried in the kind of holiday mood that makes cab drivers homicidal and pedestrians suicidal. Snow had started falling again, and a Salvation Army band was butchering carols on the corner. I circled the block, scanning for suspicious faces. Nothing jumped out, until I spotted a man across the street, half hidden by a lamp-post. He was tall, thin, collar up, hat brim low, and he was staring at the brownstone. I crossed casually, like I had all the time in the world, but when I reached the lamp-post, he was gone, just melted into the crowd. I came back inside, brushed snow off my shoulders, and told Wolfe. Somebody was casing the joint. Tall, thin, not our milkman. He bolted when I approached. Excellent, Wolfe said dryly. A watcher confirms the seriousness of our engagement. Or it confirms that Christmas lunatics don't all hang out at department stores. At 2:30, Fritz served lunch, roast chicken, bread, and a salad. Wolfe hardly touched. His mind was on Mercer. Mine was on the watcher. I kept thinking how easy it would be for someone to slip in another note while Fritz turned his back. 3 o'clock on the dot, David Mercer arrived. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a charcoal coat that cost more than my yearly shoe budget. His face was long, with lines carved deep around the mouth. Money hadn't bought him charm. Wolfe didn't rise. He gestured lazily toward the red leather chair. Mr. Mercer. Mercer ignored me as I took his coat. He sat stiffly. I told you, Wolfe, I won't pay for this circus. Constance has always been a worrier. She exaggerates. She exaggerated a pen into existence? I asked. Or a note under our kitchen door? Mercer's eyes flicked to me with disdain. Goodwin, isn't it? Spare me the sarcasm. Wolfe's voice was calm but heavy. Mr. Mercer, your partner's pen was delivered to your residence. A note was delivered here. A telephone call has threatened me. Is this too exaggeration? Mercer hesitated. His jaw tightened. Finally, he said, Jonathan Hobb is dead. He's been dead 20 years. Every Christmas I get some fool's prank. This year it's gone too far. But I won't indulge hysteria. Hysteria, Wolfe said, is not the term I would use for threats of death. Mercer leaned forward. Do you want the truth? Hobb's death was my fault. He collapsed after an argument. He couldn't handle the pressure. His widow blamed me until the day she died. So perhaps someone out there wants revenge. But I won't be blackmailed by phantoms. I whistled low. That's quite a Christmas confession, Mr. Mercer. Mercer ignored me again. I came only because Constance insisted. If you can end this nonsense, fine. If not, I'll deal with it myself. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. How? Mercer stood. By ignoring it. Before Wolfe could respond, the bell rang. I went to answer, expecting another caroller or crank. Instead, a small package sat on the stoop, wrapped in plain paper, no sender. I carried it back, set it on Wolfe's desk. Mercer's face drained of color. Another one. I slit the paper. Inside was a small glass vial filled with dark liquid. No note, just the vial. Mercer staggered back. God, Jonathan used to keep ink like that. Black India ink. He always said it would outlast us all. The room went still. Wolfe's gaze was fixed on the vial. His fingers tapped the desk once, twice. Then he said very softly, "Archie, dispose of this carefully and bolt the doors. Someone intends to escalate." Mercer's voice cracked. "Escalate to what?" Wolfe's eyes lifted. "Murder, Mr. Mercer. Tonight." If Wolfe's declaration that murder was on the Christmas program rattled Mercer, it rattled him inward. He didn't bolt for the door or start calling his lawyer. He just sat there, big hands gripping the arms of the red leather chair, staring at the vial of black ink like it might sprout fangs. "Don't be ridiculous," he said finally. But his voice cracked halfway through the word ridiculous, which downgraded the effect. "Ridiculousness," Wolfe rumbled, "does not deposit itself on my doorstep." He nudged the box containing the fountain pen with one finger. "The symbolism is clear. The pen, the ink, the threats. Someone is reconstructing Jonathan Hobb, piece by piece with theatrical precision." I added, "Yeah, and if the next package is a corpse, I'm asking for hazard pay." Wolfe ignored me. Mercer rose, straightened his coat, and jabbed a finger at the desk. "I told you, Wolfe, I won't be intimidated. I've lived with this nonsense for 20 years. If someone wants to scare me with trinkets, let them. I don't care." "Phooey," Wolfe said. "You care very much. You came here." Mercer glared, then turned for the door. "Do what you want. I'm leaving." I intercepted him, planting myself between him and the knob. "You sure you want to stroll out with a bullseye on your back? Because if Wolfe is right, and believe me, the betting odds say he is, then tonight you're going to be the star attraction in a homicide report." He hesitated, shoulders tensing, then shoved past me. "I'll take my chances." The door slammed. I looked at Wolfe. "You going to let him walk into it?" "I cannot compel a fool to wisdom," Wolfe said. "Nor can you. However, we are not done. Saul will find what he can. Meanwhile, you will call on Leonard Cutler, the stationery man. If ink is being employed as a weapon of theatre, he is the likeliest stagehand." I checked my watch. "Fine. If I hustle, I can make it before dark." The snow outside had thickened into flakes the size of postage stamps. I grabbed my hat and coat, hailed a cab, and gave the driver Cutler's address. The cabbie grumbled about holiday traffic and nearly took out a fruit stand, but he got me to 9th Avenue in one piece. Cutler's shop was narrow, with shelves stacked floor to ceiling with journals, ledgers, and fountain pens displayed like jewels. Behind the counter stood a man in his late 50s, thin as a paperclip, hair slicked back with oil. His eyes narrowed when he saw me. "Good afternoon," I said. "Leonard Cutler?" "Yes. What of it?" His voice was sharp, with an edge that could slice envelopes. "I'm Archie Goodwin, assistant to Nero Wolfe. I hear you once worked for Mercer and Hobb." His lips pressed thin. "Long ago. Word is, you weren't exactly Mercer's biggest fan." That got me a flash of teeth that wasn't a smile. Mercer drove Jonathan Hobb into the grave. He pretends otherwise. But we all knew. Jonathan was a gentleman. Mercer is a vulture. "And yet Mercer's still soaring while Jonathan's down in the ground," I said. "Doesn't that make a man itch for revenge?" Cutler's hands, pale and bony, gripped the edge of the counter. "What are you implying?" "That somebody's been sending Mercer annual reminders of Hobb. This year they decided to step it up. A pen, a vial of ink, threats, all things you'd have handy in a shop like this." His nostrils flared. "You think I would waste my time on Mercer? I have a business to run." "Yeah, but businesses don't always pay grudges." I leaned closer. "Where were you this morning around 9? "In my shop. Ask anyone." I gave the place a once-over. The shelves gleamed, dust-free, everything precise. Too precise. The kind of place where a man could spend hours polishing and still have venom left over. "Fine," I said. "Don't go far. You may get carolers later, and they won't be singing." His eyes tracked me all the way out. The snow was coming down harder now, and by the time I flagged another cab, the streets looked like powdered sugar had exploded over the city. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was exactly where I left him, seated, hands steepled, gaze fixed on the pen like it held the secrets of Rome. "Well?" he asked. "Cutler's got motive, opportunity, and access to ink by the gallon. He also has an alibi, though I don't know how airtight. He hates Mercer enough to write a novel, but whether he's our Santa, I'm not sold." "Perhaps," Wolfe said. "But hate, Archie, is a fertile soil. We must not neglect it." Before I could reply, the phone rang again. This time it was Saul. "Archie, more for you. Mercer's finances are worse than I thought. He owes heavily. Some investors are threatening lawsuits. He's desperate. And guess what? 2 of those investors are tied to Cutler, old friends of Hobb. They think Mercer stole Hobb's legacy." I relayed this. Wolfe's eyes glinted. "So, Mercer the victim may also be Mercer the cause. Interesting." Saul added, "And one more thing. There's a whisper that Hobb didn't die naturally. Some say Mercer covered something up." That nugget dropped. Saul hung up. I turned to Wolfe. "So maybe Mercer's been haunted by more than guilt. Maybe somebody knows something concrete." "Indeed," Wolfe said, "but speculation is a barren orchard until fruit appears. Tonight, Archie, fruit will appear." Fritz peeked in, wringing his hands. "Mr. Wolfe, shall I prepare dinner early? With all this tension." "No," Wolfe said. "Later. Tonight, after matters resolve." That was Wolfe for you. He could schedule justice like a dinner course. At 6 o'clock, just as I was considering sneaking a sandwich, the bell rang. This time it was Constance Fraser, bundled in her green coat, cheeks flushed from the cold. She looked even more shaken than in the morning. "Mr. Goodwin, Mr. Wolfe, I had to come. Mr. Mercer is in danger." "We're aware," I said. "He's also in denial." She clasped her gloves tight. "I found something, in his desk drawer, an old ledger with Jonathan Hobb's initials. It shouldn't be there. I think—" She broke off, voice trembling. "I think someone put it there recently." I led her into the office. Wolfe took the ledger from her and opened it. The pages were brittle, yellowed, filled with neat figures in old ink. On the inside cover, a note in faded handwriting. "To Jonathan, may this book never betray us. D.M." Mercer's initials. Constance whispered, "I don't understand. Why would he keep this hidden all these years?" Wolfe tapped the ledger with a finger. "Because, Miss Fraser, it may contain more than figures. It may contain a reason for murder." I was about to ask what reason when the phone rang yet again. I picked it up. A voice hissed, "Tonight, the reckoning. Keep out or share his fate." The line went dead. I replaced the receiver slowly. That makes 2 threats in one day. Somebody's really trying to get on our holiday card list. Wolfe's eyes closed. "Archie, bolt the doors. Tonight we will receive visitors. You know how it feels when you've got a storm coming and everyone in the room knows it, but nobody wants to be the first to mention the lightning?" That was the mood in Wolfe's office after he told me to bolt the doors. Constance sat on the edge of the red chair like she expected someone to smash through the windows at any moment. Fritz hovered in the doorway, wringing his towel like a man in a melodrama. And Wolfe was serene, which in itself was suspicious. "Archie," Wolfe said, "sit." "Sure," I said, pulling up a chair. "But I should point out that when you start giving orders like we're expecting guests, it makes me think you know more than you're letting on. Which, incidentally, is always the case." He ignored me. He was leafing through the ledger Constance had brought, his thick fingers surprisingly gentle with the brittle paper. I watched his eyes move, slow, steady, precise. Wolfe could read numbers the way other men read poetry, and whatever he was finding in those columns wasn't warming his holiday spirit. At last, he shut the book. "Miss Fraser, when did you discover this?" "This morning," she whispered. "I was putting some files away in Mr. Mercer's study. The drawer was half open. I knew it wasn't supposed to be there. Jonathan Hobbs' initials were unmistakable. And you brought it to me rather than the police." "They wouldn't listen," she said. "But you—" She broke off, searching his face. "You understand symbols. This book, it isn't just accounting." "No," Wolfe said. "It is not." I leaned forward. "Okay, then enlighten me. What are we looking at here? Just a lot of columns and numbers?" "They are not mere numbers," Wolfe said. "They are investments, and buried within, Archie, are irregularities. Jonathan Hobb recorded them. He suspected Mercer of diverting funds, of betraying their partnership. These pages would have destroyed Mercer if they had become public." I whistled. "So Hobb kept a private record of Mercer's crooked bookkeeping. Then he conveniently dies on Christmas Eve." Very festive. Constance's face had gone pale. "You think, Mr. Wolfe? You think Mr. Mercer—" Wolfe held up a hand. "Think nothing. Observe everything. What we observe is that someone has exhumed this ledger and placed it where you would find it. That act is deliberate. They wish Mercer's guilt, real or fabricated, to be illuminated this Christmas Eve." That was when the doorbell rang again. 3 sharp peals. I got up fast, but Wolfe's voice stopped me. "Caution, Archie." "Always," I said, and unbolted the door. On the stoop stood David Mercer, snow dusting his shoulders, his eyes wild. He shoved past me like a man being chased. "Wolfe, have you heard? Another message came. At my house. A card slipped under the door. It said, 'At midnight, Justice.'" "My God, what do they want?" "You," Wolfe said simply. Mercer swung toward Constance, who flinched. "Did you tell him? Did you bring it here?" She stammered. I only wanted—" "Traitor!" he spat. "You've ruined me." I stepped between them. "Easy, Santa. You're not going to win any friends yelling at your secretary. She's the only reason you're alive right now." He rounded on me, but Wolfe's voice cut through. "Sit down, Mr. Mercer. You came here because you fear death. Very well. Tonight, death will come here, not to your house. That is the bargain." Mercer froze. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Wolfe said, "that whoever plots against you will appear at my door before midnight. They cannot resist their theater. You will remain here until then. Archie will see to it." I said, "Great. I always wanted to host a Christmas Eve murder party." For the next 2 hours, the atmosphere was thick enough to slice. Wolfe sat motionless, eyes closed as if meditating. Mercer paced like a caged lion. Constance kept wringing her gloves, and Fritz vanished into the kitchen, banging pots like they were therapy. At 8, the phone rang again. I picked up. A man's voice, same as before, hissed, "Tonight, midnight, don't interfere." I hung up. That's the 3rd invitation. Whoever this joker is, they really want us to RSVP. Wolfe opened his eyes. "Excellent. Repetition betrays urgency. They are committed." I muttered, "So are most lunatics." Mercer suddenly snapped. "This is madness. I won't sit here waiting for ghosts. I'm leaving." He lunged for the door, but I was quicker. I planted myself in front of it. "No dice. Wolfe says you stay. You stay. Trust me, if you walk out now, you won't see Christmas morning." He glared at me, chest heaving, then dropped back into the chair. Time crawled. The snow outside muffled the city's roar, and the only sound was the occasional creak of the radiator. At 10, Fritz tiptoed in with sandwiches, which Mercer refused. Wolfe ignored his plate until I practically shoved it under his nose. Even then, he only nibbled, muttering about gluttony being unwise before combat. At 11:30, Saul Panzer called in again. "Archie, I've got something solid. Cutler wasn't in his shop this morning. His assistant says he left early, around 8:30. Didn't return until afternoon. No alibi for the time the package was left at your place." "Beautiful," I said. "Anything else?" "One more thing. Hobbs' nephew is back in town. Name's Edward Hobb. He's been asking questions about his uncle's death, and he's been seen talking with Cutler." That nugget hit harder than the snowstorm. I hung up, relayed it, and Wolfe's eyes glimmered. "So, the family resurfaces. A nephew with motive, a clerk with resentment. The circle tightens." Mercer exploded. "Nonsense! Edward is a fool, a child. He couldn't—" "Be silent," Wolfe snapped. "Your protestations are tedious." Mercer shut up, but his hands kept trembling. The minutes ticked. Midnight approached. At 11:55, the bell rang. One long, insistent peal. I looked at Wolfe. He nodded. I went to the door, hand ready. Behind me, Mercer muttered a prayer. Constance clutched her gloves so tightly the seams split. Wolfe sat immovable, eyes fixed on the door as though he'd been waiting all his life for this exact moment. I opened it. A figure stood there in the snow, tall and thin, coat collar up, hat brim low, the same watcher I'd seen earlier. His eyes glinted in the light, and in his gloved hand he held a small wrapped package. "Mr. Wolfe," he said, voice tight with nerves. "It's time. I've opened plenty of doors in my life, on clients, suspects, bill collectors, and more than a few dames with eyes like they were auditioning for trouble. But opening that door at midnight on Christmas Eve to find the tall stranger standing in the snow with a wrapped package in his hand, that one will stick." The man's eyes flicked past me into the office where Wolfe was waiting. "This is for him," he said, raising the package. His voice was low, strained, like he'd rehearsed the line in a mirror. I didn't take it. "You want to explain why Santa's running late and why he forgot the reindeer?" The man's jaw tightened. "Please, it's important." Behind me, Wolfe called, "Archie, admit him." That was Wolfe for you. He'd rather risk a hand grenade in the office than be accused of refusing a mystery at his own doorstep. I stepped aside, and the man entered. Snow clung to his coat. He was lean, mid-30s maybe, with sharp cheekbones and a mouth that looked like it had been set to grin since birth. Mercer surged to his feet the second he saw him. "Edward, you—" That name hit like a cymbal crash. "Edward Hobb, the nephew." Edward's gaze cut to Mercer, cold and flat. "Uncle David." The room went quiet, except for the tick of the wall clock. Wolfe gestured to the red chair. "Mr. Hobb, be seated." Edward didn't sit. He set the package on Wolfe's desk. "Open it." I looked at Wolfe. He inclined his head. So I slit the twine and peeled back the paper. Inside was another box, smaller this time, velvet-lined. Nestled inside was a gold pocket watch, old and worn, initials JH engraved on the back. Mercer made a choking sound. "Jonathan's watch! Where did you— How dare you!" Edward's voice cut like ice. "It was his. You remember, don't you? He died wearing it." Mercer shook his head violently. "No, that's impossible. It was lost." Edward's eyes narrowed. "Lost because you made it disappear. Just like you tried to make his death disappear. But I found it, and tonight everyone will know the truth." Wolfe raised a hand. "Enough of dramatics. Mr. Hobb, sit. Your props have been impressive, but I require clarity." Edward hesitated, then dropped into the chair across from Wolfe, his gaze never leaving Mercer. Wolfe steepled his fingers. "You have delivered us a pen, a vial of ink, a ledger, and now a watch. Each belonged to Jonathan Hobb. Each appeared this day. I assume you intend them as symbols. Why? Edward's voice was low. Because Mercer killed him. He worked him until his heart gave out. Then he hid the evidence. He stole from him, cheated him, destroyed his name. I want justice. Mercer leapt up. Lies. That boy was raised on fairy tales from his mother. Jonathan was weak, that's all. Weak. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. And yet, Mr. Mercer, weakness does not explain the ledger, nor the inscription inside it. You wrote those words, "May this book never betray us." Did you not? Mercer's mouth opened, then closed. His face flushed scarlet. Wolfe leaned back. You see, the truth festers. Constance spoke suddenly, voice trembling. Edward, why bring these things here? Why not the police? Because the police won't care about symbols, Edward said. But Wolfe will. Wolfe can expose him. Wolfe closed his eyes. Indeed, but exposure is not my aim. My aim is comprehension, and comprehension demands motive. Mr. Hobb, what is your motive tonight? To frighten Mercer, to kill him, or merely to parade his guilt? Edward's fists clenched. To make him pay. If he won't confess, then... That was enough to get me moving. I slid closer, ready in case the kid decided to leap across the desk. He looked wired enough to try. Mercer was panting, sweat gleaming on his forehead. You see? He's mad. He'll do anything. Wolfe, arrest him. Foy, Wolfe said. I'm not the police, and Mr. Hobb is not mad. He is desperate. Edward's eyes flicked to Wolfe. Then help me. Help me finish what Jonathan started. Finish? Wolfe repeated softly. Explain. Edward hesitated, then drew something from his coat pocket. A folded sheet of paper, yellowed with age. He laid it on Wolfe's desk. I unfolded it. It was a letter, Jonathan Hobb's handwriting. Shaky but legible. Dated 2 days before his death. If I do not survive this week, know that Mercer has betrayed me. The ledger proves it. The watch is my witness. Do not let him bury me in silence. The room froze. Mercer staggered back as though struck. Forgery. That's a forgery. Wolfe studied the paper. No, the ink is aged. The hand authentic. This is Jonathan's testament, and yet it is too perfect, too conveniently discovered after 20 years. Edward's voice cracked. It was hidden in my mother's trunk. I found it last month, along with the watch. He meant for me to know. Wolfe's eyes opened, dark and heavy. So you have been staging this theater. The pen, the ink, the ledger, the watch. Not to kill Mercer, but to corner him, to force a confession. Edward's lips trembled. Yes, but if he won't confess, then I cut in. Then what? You planning to add murder to your uncle's holiday traditions? His silence was answer enough. Wolfe sighed. Archie, remove the watch. And the letter. They are now evidence. I scooped them up. Edward half rose, but Wolfe's glare froze him. Mr. Hobb, Wolfe said, you're young, but you are not clever enough to kill unnoticed. If you strike Mercer, you will hang. That is not justice. That is futility. Mercer, voice hoarse, snarled. He's lying. He forged it all. Wolfe's tone was final. No, but you, Mr. Mercer, will answer for it. The ledger alone is enough to destroy you. Whether the courts pursue you is irrelevant. You are undone. Edward's chest heaved, but some of the fury bled out of him. He slumped back into the chair, face pale. Midnight struck. The clock's chimes echoed through the room like a verdict. Wolfe lifted his glass of beer, took a slow sip, and said, Thus the reckoning arrives. Without blood. Mercer sagged, head in hands. Edward sat trembling, Constance's eyes filled with tears. And me? I leaned against the desk. wondering how much more of this Christmas Eve could fit into one night before the city ran out of snow. Then the phone rang. The clock had barely finished chiming midnight when the phone split the silence. I shot Wolfe a look. He didn't move, except to wave a finger. So I picked up. "Goodwin," I said. There was a pause, faint static on the line, and then a voice. Low, measured, deliberate. "I see you've opened the box. I see you've brought them together. Don't believe what you've been told. Tonight isn't over." Click. The line went dead. I replaced the receiver slowly. That makes 4, and unless the phone company's branching into clairvoyance, somebody out there knows exactly what's going on in this room. Mercer lurched upright, face blotched red. "It's him. It has to be Cutler. He's been obsessed for years, poisoning the well, turning Edward against me." Edward shot to his feet. "Don't blame him. This is your doing, Mercer. Everything that's happening tonight is because of you." "Sit down, both of you," Wolfe barked. His voice was iron, and it froze them where they stood. He opened his eyes fully, gaze moving from one to the other. "Archie, secure the front door. No one enters until I permit it." I crossed to the door and slid the bolt home with a metallic clunk. Whatever company we were expecting, it looked like we were keeping the guest list short. Wolfe pointed at the letter on his desk. "This testament from Jonathan Hobb. Its sudden appearance is suspect. Its authenticity cannot be dismissed, but neither can its convenience. Someone has orchestrated tonight with meticulous precision. The question is, who benefits?" "Edward," Mercer spat. "He wants to ruin me, to take revenge for things he doesn't understand." Edward's jaw tightened. "I don't want your fortune, Mercer. I want the truth." "And yet," Wolfe said, "you have staged this elaborate charade. The pen, the ink, the watch, the letter. Why? Why now?" Edward hesitated, then said, "Because I finally found the letter. Because this year, for the first time, I had proof." Wolfe studied him. "And yet someone telephoned, threatening me. Someone who knew details you could not have known unless you were spying on my household. Were you outside my door this morning, Edward?" "No," Edward said quickly. Too quickly. Mercer sneered. "There. You see? He's lying." Wolfe's eyes flicked to me. "Archie, when you circled the block this morning, you reported a watcher, a tall, thin man. Does Mr. Hobb resemble him?" I studied Edward. Same build, same coat length, same nervous shoulders. "Yeah," I said slowly. "He could have been our lamppost lurker." Edward's face flushed. I was watching, yes, but only because I wanted to be sure the package got inside. I didn't make the call." "Pfui," Wolfe said. "You expect me to swallow that some anonymous conspirator shadowed your theatrics, duplicating your symbols, and placed threats under my door while you merely watched? No, that stretches credulity." Edward's fists clenched. "You don't understand. I'm not the only one. There's someone else. Someone who helped me find the watch and the letter. Someone who hates Mercer even more than I do." That earned him 3 stares. Mine, Wolfe's, and Constance's. She had gone pale, her hands gripping her gloves until the seams tore further. "Who?" Wolfe demanded. Edward swallowed. "Leonard Cutler." I exhaled. "There's our stationery man again. I knew he'd be back for an encore." Wolfe's lips compressed. "So you conspired with him?" Edward shook his head violently. "No, not conspired. He told me where to look. He said Mercer had hidden things. He only wanted the truth out, the same as me." Mercer's voice thundered. "Lies! Cutler would do anything to destroy me. He's feeding you poison, boy. He's been obsessed for decades." Wolfe's gaze sharpened. "If Cutler is involved, then the telephone calls are explicable. He has the means, the obsession, and the anonymity. But why direct threats to me? Why involve me at all?" The silence stretched. Then Constance spoke softly, almost inaudibly. "Because you wouldn't be ignored." Every head turned. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean, Miss Fraser?" Her face was pale, but she met his gaze. Cutler came to me. Weeks ago, he said Mercer deserved to be exposed. He knew about the pen, the ledger, the watch. He said if we brought them to you, Wolfe, you would see the truth. You would force it out. That was the only way." Mercer's roar shook the walls. Constance, you betrayed me." She shrank back. I couldn't stay silent anymore. Not after everything. Mercer's fists clenched, but Wolfe cut him short. "Sit down, Mr. Mercer, or Archie will sit you down. Miss Fraser, are you telling me you and Cutler orchestrated these deliveries?" She nodded weakly. "Yes, but not the calls. I swear, he promised there would be no danger. Only truth." I muttered, "Sure, and next he'll promise free turkeys for the poor." Wolfe tapped the arm of his chair. "So, the ledger appears in Mercer's desk. The watch emerges from a trunk. The pen is delivered, each event guided by Cutler, abetted by you. That, Miss Fraser, is conspiracy." Her voice cracked. "I only wanted justice." Wolfe's eyes closed. "Justice is not achieved with half-truths and theatre. It is achieved with facts, and the fact is, tonight someone intends violence." At that exact moment, the office lights flickered. Then the power cut, plunging the brownstone into darkness. Constance gasped. Mercer cursed. Edward leapt to his feet. I was already moving, pulling the revolver from my drawer, positioning myself near the door. "Wolfe, stay put. Whoever's pulling the wires is making their move." From the kitchen, Fritz shouted, "The fuse box! Someone tampered!" His words cut off in a crash. I bolted for the hall, Mercer stumbling behind me. In the dim light from the street, I saw a shadow dart past the staircase, heading for the kitchen. I gave chase, but the figure slipped out the back before I could catch him. By the time I reached the alley, the snow was falling thick and heavy, and whoever it was had vanished into the storm. I came back inside, breath clouding in the cold air. Fritz was shaken but unhurt, a pile of broken crockery at his feet. Back in the office, Wolfe was still in his chair, as immovable as the Sphinx. "Report," he said. Somebody cut the power, slipped inside, and nearly flattened Fritz. They escaped out the back. Could have been Cutler, could have been Santa Claus. Too dark to tell. Wolfe's brows furrowed. Not Santa Claus. Cutler. He has escalated. He intended to frighten, perhaps to strike. That confirms my deduction. Tonight he will attempt murder. Mercer slumped into the chair, face gray. Murder? Mine, of course. Not necessarily, Wolfe said. Symbols are not chosen at random. The pen, the ink, the watch. These are aimed at Mercer. But the threats to me suggest a broader aim, perhaps to silence me or to create a spectacle with multiple victims. Constance's voice shook. Then we're all in danger. Yes, Wolfe said simply. And therefore we will remain here, together until Cutler makes his move. Archie, restore the lights. Fritz, lock the kitchen door. Midnight has struck, but the night is far from done. I looked around the room, Mercer sweating, Edward trembling, Constance pale, Wolfe serene as a mountain, and thought this was going to be the longest Christmas Eve of my life. Getting the lights back on took 10 minutes. Fritz, still rattled, fetched a fresh fuse while I held a flashlight steady and kept my revolver handy in case our nocturnal guest decided to reapply for entrance. When the bulbs flickered back to life, the office looked like the aftermath of a séance. Mercer sweating buckets, Edward's jaw tight enough to crack, Constance pale as candle wax, and Wolfe calm as an oak tree in a windstorm. He gestured for us all to resume our seats. We are dealing, he said, with a man who desires theatre. Cutting the power, slipping inside, these were not attempts at efficiency. They were flourishes designed to unsettle. He will not stop until he has completed his tableau. Mercer groaned. You speak of him like an artist. He's a lunatic. Call the police, Wolfe. Let them drag Cutler away before he kills someone. Inspector Kramer, Wolfe replied, would arrive with noise and impatience, trampling the symbols before they can be understood. No, we will resolve this ourselves. I said, great. So instead of backup, we're running a one-night-only performance of the Nutcracker murders. Fine. What's my role? Guard, Wolfe said simply. Your revolver is insurance, but intellect is our weapon. Edward leaned forward, eyes blazing. If you know Cutler means harm, then why not stop him now? Why wait for him to strike? Because, Wolfe said, to stop him, I must know not merely his identity, but his aim. Whom does he intend as his final victim? That will tell us why he acts. Mercer's voice was bitter. Who else? Me. He wants me dead. He's wanted it for years. Wolfe didn't answer. He only looked at Mercer with the kind of gaze that suggested Mercer was skipping a detail Wolfe had already pocketed. The hours between midnight and one dragged like molasses in January. Snow piled higher against the windows, muffling the outside world. Inside, nerves rubbed raw. Mercer paced, muttering about betrayal. Edward sat rigid, hands clenched. Constance tried to pray quietly, but her whispering only made Mercer bark at her. I kept close to the door, revolver resting in my hand, wishing for a caroler to shoot at just to break the tension. At 1:07 the bell rang again, one sharp peal. I moved to the door, Wolfe's gaze fixed on me. I unlocked it cautiously, gun ready. Nobody stood on the stoop, just the snow, falling thick, and a small envelope pinned to the wood with a brass tack. I brought it inside. Wolfe slit it open with his thumb. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the same tidy cursive as before. 1 hour remains. Constance gave a little cry. Edward's face darkened. Mercer cursed. Archie, Wolfe said, note the hand, the same as before. Cutler's. He cannot resist dramatics. Then what's the 1 hour? 2 o'clock curtain call? Precisely, Wolfe said. Mercer sank into the chair. You're all mad. Sitting here waiting for him. He'll kill us. Silence, Wolfe snapped. You have evaded guilt for 2 decades. If Cutler intends to kill, it will be you. But that is not certain. He may wish to strike where guilt is hidden. Mercer's head jerked up. What do you mean? Hidden. Enough, Wolfe said. He shut his eyes again, thinking. Time ticked. At 1:40, the phone rang. I grabbed it before it could wake the dead. Goodwin, I barked. The voice was hushed, urgent. One last gift waits, in the alley behind the house. Bring Mercer. Alone. Then silence. I relayed it. Wolfe's brow furrowed. The culmination, the final symbol. Of course. Mercer staggered up. I won't go, it's a trap. Indeed, Wolfe said, and precisely why you must not go. Archie, you will. Wonderful, I said. Risk my neck for a lunatic with a flair for drama. My Christmas bonus better be spectacular. I pulled on my coat, shoved the revolver in my pocket, and went out the back. The alley was half buried in snow, wind slicing like knives. I scanned the shadows with my flashlight. There, against the fence, sat another package, wooden, about the size of a bread box. I crouched, opened it. Inside was a framed photograph. Jonathan Hobb and David Mercer standing side by side in their younger years, smiling stiffly. Across the glass, in thick black ink, someone had scrawled one word, thief. I carried it back. Wolfe took one look, and his mouth tightened. The last symbol, the accusation in its rawest form. Mercer trembled, staring at the photo. It's nothing. A forgery. A sick trick. Wolfe said nothing. He simply rang for Fritz, instructed him to lock every window, and told us to remain where we were. 2 o'clock struck. The bell rang again, loud and long. This time, Wolfe rose. The sight alone was enough to hush everyone. He planted his hands on the desk, massive, immovable. Archie. Admit him. I went to the door, revolver steady. When I swung it open, Leonard Cutler stood there. His thin face was pale, snow in his hair, eyes burning with a fever that wasn't from the cold. "Where is Mercer?" he demanded. I didn't answer. Wolfe's voice rolled from behind me. "Enter, Mr. Cutler, and end your theatrics." Cutler stepped inside, dripping snow, gaze fixed on Mercer. "You murderer," he hissed. "Tonight you answer for Jonathan." Mercer scrambled back, face gray. "Keep him away from me." I raised my revolver. "Easy, Cutler. You're not writing the final act here." But Wolfe's voice cut through. "No, Archie. Lower it. He won't kill. Not yet." Cutler's chest heaved. He deserves it. He worked Jonathan to death. He stole from him, ruined him, and then buried it all. I swore I'd remind him every Christmas until he broke. And tonight, Wolfe said, "you intended spectacle, but you blundered, because you are not alone in your conspiracy." Cutler froze. "What?" Wolfe's eyes opened fully, gleaming. "You and Miss Fraser together staged this performance. She betrayed Mercer from within, you from without, but neither of you could have supplied the ledger. That, I suspect, came from another hand, perhaps one even closer." Edward stirred, lips parting. Wolfe's gaze swung to him. "Indeed, young man. You too, you played your part, but all of you overlooked one detail, the handwriting on the letters. It is not merely Cutler's hand, it is a careful imitation. The true author sits among us, still." Every head jerked, eyes widening. Wolfe settled back, massive and calm. "Tonight's conspiracy is not yet complete, but before dawn, I will name the architect." The room went silent, except for the storm raging outside. You could have heard a pin drop in that office. Wolfe had just lobbed the kind of bombshell that makes people swallow their tongues. The true mastermind was still sitting among us. Mercer looked like a man whose knees had been swapped for rubber. Cutler froze in place, thin chest rising and falling. Constance pressed a hand to her throat, pale as new snow. And Edward was staring at Wolfe like he'd just been told Christmas morning came with an execution. I leaned against the desk, revolver steady, eyes darting from one to another. "Okay, Wolfe," I said. "You want to elaborate before the tension gets so thick I need a saw." "Patience, Archie," Wolfe replied, calm as a glacier. "First, let us consider the handwriting. The notes slipped under our door, the one in the package, and tonight's envelope. They are consistent. Too consistent. Identical as though traced." Cutler blinked. "You're saying I didn't write them?" "I am saying," Wolfe intoned, "that you could have, but you did not. You have a sharp, angular script, Mr. Cutler. I've seen your signature on receipts at your shop. These notes, however, are rounded, deliberate imitations of Jonathan Hobbs' hand." Edward's voice cracked. But I gave him the letter, my uncle's letter. Maybe Cutler copied it." "Precisely," Wolfe cut in. "Copied, yes, but not by him. He lacks the subtlety. No, the one who wrote these notes is someone practiced in imitating a hand, someone with long familiarity, someone like a secretary." Every head snapped toward Constance. She flinched, color flooding her cheeks. "No," she whispered. "No, that's not." Mercer's voice boomed, thick with rage. You've been undermining me all along. You connived with Cutler. You fed this boy lies." Constance shook her head violently, tears welling. "I only wanted the truth. Cutler said. He said it was the only way to make you confess. He told me what to write." "Pfui," Wolfe said. "You were not merely a messenger, Miss Fraser. You were the engine. Cutler fed you his resentment, Edward his passion, but you had the skill to bind it together. You crafted the notes, you planted the ledger, you delivered the pen, you wove the conspiracy into a seamless play." She broke then, burying her face in her hands. Yes, yes, I wrote them, but only because Mercer is guilty. He killed Jonathan. He destroyed him. Mercer lunged at her, fists clenched. You lying witch! I was across the room before he reached her. One well-placed shoulder, and Mercer was back in the red chair, gasping. Sit down, pal. This isn't amateur night at the boxing gym. Edward leapt up, voice fierce. Don't touch her. She was trying to help me. Help my uncle. Enough, Wolfe thundered. The word shook the room. He opened his eyes, dark and heavy, fixing each of them in turn. We have assembled the cast. Now we require the climax. Mr. Mercer, you will listen. Miss Fraser, you will confess. Mr. Cutler, you will be silent unless addressed. And Mr. Hobb, you will restrain your temper. They froze like school children before a strict headmaster. Wolfe leaned forward slightly, which for him was the equivalent of a full military advance. The truth is simple, he said. Jonathan Hobb suspected his partner of betrayal. He left evidence, the ledger, the watch, the letter, but he died before acting. For 20 years, resentment simmered. Cutler nurtured it, Edward inherited it, and Miss Fraser, who knew Mercer's habits better than any, gave it voice. Together, you built a conspiracy, not to kill, perhaps not even to extort, but to expose. Yet in your fervor, you endangered lives. You tampered with doors, with lights, with nerves. You brought threats into my house. That I do not tolerate. His gaze cut to Constance. You, madam, are the linchpin. Without you, this would be scattered fragments. You crafted it into a spectacle. Constance sobbed. I only wanted him to admit it, to say he ruined Jonathan, to hear it from his lips. Mercer's face twisted, veins standing out on his forehead. Admit what? That Jonathan was weak, that he couldn't handle the pace. That's not murder. Edward shouted, You stole from him. You drove him to his grave. Silence, Wolfe roared again. The walls practically rattled. The room fell into a hush, broken only by the crackle of the radiator and Mercer's ragged breathing. Wolfe turned his gaze back to Mercer, slow and deliberate. I will say this plainly. You did not murder Jonathan Hobb with your hands. His heart failed him. But you did betray him, financially, morally. You siphoned funds, you deceived him, and the shock contributed to his collapse. That is your guilt. That is what these three sought to avenge. Mercer sagged, face ashen. Lies. All lies. No, Wolfe said coldly. Truth. And though no jury will convict you of murder, the record will. The ledger, the letter, they will damn you. Your reputation, your firm, your legacy, they are finished. Constance raised her tear-streaked face. Then justice is done. Justice, Wolfe replied, is never so tidy. You conspired. You trespassed here. Inspector Kramer will have much to say when he arrives. That made Mercer stir. Kramer? You'd call him now? Of course, Wolfe said. This charade ends tonight. I will not permit my house to be a stage for further antics. Archie, call him. I picked up the phone, dialed, and after a few growls from a sleepy desk sergeant, got Kramer himself. I explained briefly. His language suggested he'd rather be in bed, but he promised to come. While we waited, the room was a stew of silence and smoldering glares. Edward sat rigid, staring daggers at Mercer. Cutler leaned against the wall, thin shoulders sagging with exhaustion. Constance wept quietly. Mercer brooded, eyes on the floor every so often, muttering to himself. Wolfe closed his eyes again, as though the matter were already finished. At 2:30, the bell rang. I opened the door, and there was Kramer, cigar already lit, snow clinging to his hat. He stomped in, glanced around, and growled, Well, well, Merry Christmas to me. What's the circus this time, Wolfe? Archie will brief you, Wolfe said, not opening his eyes. So I did, in about 200 words. Kramer listened, chewing his cigar, eyes narrowing as I mentioned the ledger, the letter, the staged theatrics. He swung his gaze to Mercer. That true? Mercer's lips twisted. All exaggerations. Lies spun by lunatics. Uh-huh, Kramer said. Well, you'll come with me anyway. Statements, evidence. We'll see what sticks. He jabbed a thumb at Constance. And you too. Forged notes, threats. That's obstruction if I ever saw it. Constance sagged but nodded, resigned. Edward leapt up. Don't arrest her. She only... Kramer cut him off. Sit down, kid, or I'll haul you too. Cutler spoke for the first time in 20 minutes, voice hoarse. I'll come. I won't let her take it alone. Kramer's eyes rolled heavenward. Wonderful. 3 lunatics and 1 crooked banker all in one night. Wolfe, you really know how to stuff my Christmas stocking. Phooey, Wolfe muttered. Kramer herded them toward the door, grumbling about paperwork. When it closed behind them, silence settled again, heavy and final. Fritz tiptoed in, looking shaken. Mr. Wolfe, shall I serve the Christmas pudding now? Wolfe sighed. Yes, Fritz, and bring beer. I dropped into my chair, revolver back in the drawer, body aching with fatigue. Well, that was festive. You think Kramer will actually nail Mercer for anything? Perhaps not murder, Wolfe said, but disgrace certainly. That is punishment enough. I smirked. Merry Christmas indeed. When Kramer slammed the door behind him and took his circus of suspects off into the storm, the brownstone felt like it exhaled. The tension that had been winding tighter and tighter since breakfast finally loosened, though not by much. Fritz hovered in the doorway with a tray, Christmas pudding no less, while Wolfe settled back into his chair with the sigh of a man reclaiming his rightful throne. You'll eat first, then pontificate, I asked him. Phooey, Wolfe said. The pudding can wait. I will have a beer. Fritz looked like he'd been handed a pardon. He hurried away and I collapsed into my chair. For once I didn't feel like wisecracking. My head was still buzzing from the revolving door of threats, packages, confessions, and theatrics. I rubbed my temples. All right. Wolfe, lay it out. I've spent the whole night running errands, chasing shadows, and watching suspects try to strangle each other. What exactly did we accomplish besides getting Kramer to curse us into the new year? Wolfe closed his eyes, fingers steepled. Archie, we performed the essential task of separating noise from truth. The pen, the ink, the watch, the letter, those were noise. The truth lay in the ledger. That book proves Mercer's perfidy, and it is the cornerstone. Yeah, sure. But Mercer's still walking around free unless Kramer decides to pin something on him. And Constance, Edward, and Cutler, half the cast of the Christmas Eve players. They're off singing carols in Kramer's interrogation room. So where does that leave us? Exactly where I intended, Wolfe said. The matter is not closed. I groaned. You couldn't just let Kramer clean up, could you? No, you've got to gnaw the bone until dawn. Wolfe ignored me. He opened his eyes, heavy and dark. Archie, summon Saul. Tell him to come immediately, and Ori too. This evening is not concluded. I didn't argue, though I wanted to. Instead, I dialed, waking Saul and Ori from whatever warm nests they'd found for Christmas Eve. Both grumbled, but both agreed to come. Saul, being Saul, didn't even ask why. By the time Fritz brought Wolfe his beer, I'd settled back with my own glass and tried to ignore the icy wind rattling the windows. The brownstone had been violated once already tonight. I wasn't keen on giving it another chance. At 3:30, Saul arrived, dusted with snow, followed not long after by Ori. Both looked like they'd been dragged out of stockings by an impatient Santa. All right, Wolfe, Saul said in his usual deadpan. What's the game? The game, Wolfe replied, is resolution. Inspector Kramer is diligent but unimaginative. He will bluster, he will threaten, and he will perhaps prosecute Miss Fraser for forgery and Mr. Cutler for harassment. He will never touch Mercer. Yet Mercer is the root. He must be exposed. Ori crossed his arms. And you want us to do the digging? Not digging, Wolfe said. Verifying. The ledger is genuine. But we require corroboration. Transactions, witnesses, traces of funds. Saul, you will follow the money. Ori, you will confirm Cutler's whereabouts this morning and whether he tampered with my fuse box. Archie will coordinate. Wonderful, I said. A merry little scavenger hunt at 4 a.m. But Saul just nodded. Give me the names. Wolfe provided them, precise and detailed. The man could pluck numbers out of columns and stitch them into a noose before you blinked. Saul scribbled notes. Ori frowned but didn't argue. Once they'd gone, the house quieted again. Wolfe sipped his beer, eyes closed. Archie, go to bed. We will resume when Saul reports. Fat chance, I muttered. But I was too tired to protest. I left him in his chair, the ledger on his desk like a holy text, and went upstairs. I don't remember hitting the pillow. The phone woke me at 9. Saul's voice was flat but edged with triumph. Archie, tell Wolfe Mercer's cooked. I traced 2 transfers from 20 years ago, funds siphoned from joint accounts into Mercer's personal holdings. The ledger matches perfectly. Hobb knew. Mercer covered it up. That got me out of bed. I was downstairs in 2 minutes flat, giving Wolfe the news while Fritz fussed with breakfast. Wolfe merely nodded, as though Saul had confirmed the sunrise. Excellent. Now we can end this. As if on cue, the bell rang. It was Kramer, cigar already lit, scowl in place. He stomped in, coat dripping snow. Wolfe, I ought to strangle you. I wasted half the night with your lunatics. Fraser admits the letters. Cutler admits the theatrics. The kid admits he let himself be used. Mercer denies everything. I can't make a case out of smoke and Christmas decorations. Sit, Wolfe commanded. Kramer bristled. Don't order me. Sit, Wolfe repeated, and pointed. Kramer sat, muttering. Wolfe leaned forward, eyes sharp. Inspector, you now have more than smoke. You have fire. Saul Panzer traced Mercer's thefts. The ledger is corroborated. Jonathan Hobb was betrayed, and Mercer profited. That betrayal contributed to his death. You can present it as fraud, as theft, even as manslaughter if you are bold. But Mercer is finished. Kramer's cigar nearly fell from his mouth. You're serious? Always, Wolfe said. I handed over Saul's notes. Kramer skimmed them, grunted, and stuffed them in his pocket. Well, I'll be damned. Maybe this'll stick after all, but if I find one crack in this, Wolfe, I'll— Phooey, Wolfe said. You will do as you always do, bluster, then act. Kramer growled but didn't deny it. He stomped out, slamming the door so hard Fritz winced. Wolfe leaned back, folding his hands. There, order is restored. I snorted. Order, sure. Mercer's headed for disgrace, Constance for charges, Cutler for a breakdown, Edward for therapy, and Kramer for ulcers. Very orderly. Wolfe closed his eyes. Justice is never tidy, Archie, but it is achieved. Fritz appeared with the breakfast tray. Eggs, sausages, toast, and yes, butter, restored to its rightful place. I grinned, shaking my head. Well, Merry Christmas, Wolfe. Nothing says peace on earth like fraud, betrayal, and threats of murder. He took his plate, lifted his fork, and said, Nonsense. Nothing says peace on earth like a proper breakfast. If there's one thing you can count on after a night like we'd had, it's that Nero Wolfe won't let you breathe easy just because the cops tromped out with their suspects and Saul delivered his evidence in a neat package. Wolfe doesn't consider a case over until he's pronounced it over, preferably with half a beer in his hand and the other half waiting in the cooler. That morning, Christmas Day, The snow outside was piled so high, the city looked like it had been rolled in flour. Fritz had the kitchen humming, the smell of roast goose promising salvation, and I was half ready to declare the case closed myself, no matter what Wolfe said. But at 11 sharp, Wolfe summoned me into the office with that particular tone that means I will not be ignored. He was in his chair, the ledger open on the desk like an oracle. He gestured to the red leather seats. "Archie, assemble them." I blinked. Assemble who? Kramer took them all. "Summon them back," Wolfe said. "Miss Fraser, Mr. Cutler, young Mr. Hobb, Mercer too if he is not yet in hiding. Kramer will grumble, but he will comply. They must hear the truth from me, not from his blunt tongue." I groaned. "Wolfe, you realize it's Christmas morning. People usually unwrap gifts, not indictments." "Phooey," Wolfe said. "This is their gift. Clarity." It took 2 hours of calls, persuasion, and 1 bribe of Fritz's spiced coffee cake. But by mid-afternoon, the brownstone was once again crowded. Kramer came too, fuming about wasted time, but I knew he was secretly curious. He always is. He parked himself in the corner with his cigar, muttering about lunatics. Constance looked exhausted, eyes red from crying. Edward was pale, his anger cool to embers. Cutler was stiff, defiant, but with the kind of hollowness that comes after too many years feeding a grudge. Mercer looked like a man being led to the gallows, his arrogance crumbling into bitterness. Wolfe waited until they were all seated before lifting his head. "You are here," he began, "because symbols alone cannot serve justice. Last night you conspired with ink, with relics, with threats. Today you will hear facts." Mercer snorted. "Your facts are lies." "Silence," Wolfe said, and the word landed like a hammer. "The ledger has been examined. The transfers it records, funds moved from joint accounts to your personal holdings, are corroborated by independent traces. Saul Panzer verified them this morning. They match precisely." Mercer's face twitched. "Falsifications?" "No," Wolfe said, voice heavy. "Truth. Jonathan Hobb knew. He left this ledger as his safeguard. His heart failed him before he could act, but your betrayal hastened his death. That, Mr. Mercer, is your guilt." Edward leaned forward, hands trembling. "So my uncle was right. He wasn't weak. He was betrayed." "Yes," Wolfe said, "but do not romanticize it. His heart was fragile. Mercer's treachery was the spur, not the blow. Still, it is guilt enough." Constance whispered, "Then what we did, it wasn't for nothing." Wolfe's eyes fixed on her. "No, it was for something, but it was reckless. You forged threats, planted symbols, incited terror. You endangered lives. That is not justice. It is folly." Cutler's voice cracked. "But he deserved to be ruined." "He has been," Wolfe said coldly. "His name, his firm, his fortune, they are ashes. That is your victory. You could have waited for truth to surface through proper channels. Instead, you staged theater. Consider yourselves fortunate no blood was shed." Kramer grunted. Fortunate for me, you mean. Less paperwork." Wolfe ignored him. He turned his gaze on Mercer. "Mr. Mercer, you may yet escape prison. The law hesitates with old wounds, but you will not escape disgrace. That ledger will be your ruin. Every client will see it, every associate. Your name will be filth." Mercer sagged, gray as ash. "All of you, devils. You hound me with ghosts." "Not ghosts," Wolfe said. "Facts. You forged your own ruin 20 years ago. It has only now reached you." For a moment, nobody spoke. The weight of Wolfe's words hung in the room like smoke. Finally, Edward whispered, "Then it's done. My uncle's name is cleared." Wolfe's lips tightened. Cleared of weakness, perhaps. Not of death. He was betrayed, but he also succumbed. You must accept both, or you will waste your life as Mr. Cutler has, feeding a grudge until it consumes you." Edward lowered his eyes. Wolfe leaned back. "Miss Fraser, you will answer to Kramer for your forgeries. Mr. Cutler, you will answer for your harassment, but the true punishment is not legal. It is in knowing you allowed your zeal to blind you. Learn from it." Constance nodded, weeping silently. Cutler said nothing, but his shoulders sagged. Kramer stood, puffing his cigar. "Well, I've heard enough. You've made your sermon, Wolfe. I'll take them back, sort the charges, see what sticks. Mercer, you're coming too. Don't think I won't squeeze every drop from that ledger." Mercer muttered something foul, but he rose. As Kramer herded them out, Wolfe finally reached for his beer. He took a long swallow, set it down, and closed his eyes. "At last," he said, "peace." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Peace? After all that? Wolfe, I don't think this household knows the meaning of the word. "Pfui," Wolfe said. "It knows. Now, Fritz will serve the goose." And that was it. Christmas Day ended not with carols or gifts, but with Wolfe savoring his dinner, Kramer growling in the snow, and 4 lives altered forever. And me, I had the satisfaction of knowing I'd get at least one quiet night before the next lunatic banged on our door. Christmas night in the brownstone should have been peaceful, considering the storm outside had settled into a soft white curtain, and Kramer had carted away the cast of suspects like a man hauling out the garbage. But Wolfe doesn't consider a matter finished until he's delivered his own benediction, which usually comes in the form of a lecture disguised as conversation. So instead of dozing off with eggnog, I was back in the office with Wolfe, who was polishing off his 3rd bottle of beer while Fritz fussed in the kitchen. "You've had your say, Wolfe," I told him. "Kramer's got his charges, Mercer's ruined, the others are headed for varying shades of trouble. Case closed, wrapped up in tinsel. Why not let it go?" "Pfui," Wolfe said. "A case is never closed until comprehension is complete." "You mean until you've had the last word?" "Precisely." I leaned back, hands behind my head. "Then go ahead. You've got me trapped anyway." He adjusted in his chair, eyes narrowing as if he were filing the last pieces into their places. "Archie, the essential fact was never the pen, the ink, the watch, or even the letter. Those were flourishes, distractions. The essential fact was the ledger. Jonathan Hobb knew Mercer was siphoning funds. He recorded it, and he left evidence behind. That ledger alone doomed Mercer. Which makes all the theatrics redundant," I said. "Not redundant," Wolfe corrected. "Dangerous. Miss Fraser's forged notes and Cutler's threats nearly transformed resentment into tragedy. Edward's passion inflamed it further. They wanted spectacle, but they nearly created carnage. It is fortunate no blood was spilled." I shrugged. "Depends how you define blood. Mercer may still be breathing, but his name's been butchered." Wolfe's lips twitched, which for him was practically a chuckle. Poetic, but apt. We let the silence settle for a moment. Outside, a car horn honked weakly in the snow, muffled by the drifts. Fritz entered with the goose, carving knife gleaming, and set the platter on the table with the solemnity of a priest presenting an offering. The smell was heavenly. Wolfe's eyes softened. Not for me, mind you, but for the goose. As Fritz carved, Wolfe resumed. "Justice is never tidy, Archie. Jonathan Hobb will not rise from his grave. David Mercer will not serve years in prison, though he deserves to. But reputations, once stained, seldom recover. Mercer's ruin is permanent. That is the balance. Not sure Edward or Constance will feel much balance when they're facing forgery charges," I said. "They will learn," Wolfe said. "The law may be lenient with them, and perhaps, in time, they will find lives beyond resentment. Cutler, too, or not. You sound almost charitable." "Pfui. Charity is irrelevant. Observation is not." Fritz served my plate, then Wolfe's. I tucked in, glad for once to have a meal that didn't come with interruptions, at least not yet. Wolfe ate with his usual precision, savoring each bite as though it proved his philosophy of life. After a while, I said, "You know, there's something almost fitting about it. 20 years of guilt and grudges come boiling up on Christmas Eve of all nights, like the ghost of Jacob Marley rattling his chains." Wolfe's eyes glimmered. An apt metaphor. Guilt is a chain. Mercer forged his own links. His accusers merely shook them. "And you," I said, "snapped them shut." He inclined his head, as was necessary. We ate in silence for a bit, only the clink of cutlery and the faint crackle of the fire filling the room. When my plate was cleared, I leaned back and stretched. "So tell me, Wolfe, do you ever think about the human side of it? Edward wanted his uncle's name cleared. Constance wanted justice for what she thought was murder. Cutler wanted revenge. Mercer wanted to hide. You sit there like a mountain, but don't you ever—" "Archie," Wolfe interrupted. "I'm not a priest. I do not absolve, nor do I condemn beyond the facts. I comprehend. That is enough." "Yeah, but comprehension doesn't exactly keep people warm at night." "That," Wolfe said, "is not my responsibility. My responsibility is truth." I didn't argue. He was right in his own way. But as I poured myself a second glass of wine, I couldn't help wondering what would happen to the players once they left our stage. Constance, facing disgrace, but maybe finding some path back. Edward, carrying both pride and sorrow. Cutler, probably retreating into his ink bottles. And Mercer, ruined but unpunished by the law, living in the wreckage of his own making. I said, "So what's the lesson, Wolfe? Don't cheat your business partner, or don't stage a midnight pageant with ink and fountain pens." "The lesson," Wolfe said, raising his glass of beer, "is that truth, however delayed, asserts itself. Always." That was Wolfe's sermon, neat and clean. And for once I didn't argue. Fritz brought in the pudding, flambéed with brandy, blue flames dancing in the dim light. Wolfe watched it with the satisfaction of a man who believed in order restored. Outside, the storm finally cleared, moonlight glinting on snowbanks. Inside, the brownstone was warm again, secure, its walls holding the weight of secrets resolved. I lifted my glass. "Merry Christmas, Wolfe," he grunted. Indeed. And that was that. The Christmas Eve conspiracy ended not with gunfire or blood, but with exposure, disgrace, and a ruined man staring down the truth he'd tried to bury for 20 years. Wolfe had his order, I had my wisecracks, and Fritz had his goose. As for the rest, well, like Wolfe said, justice is never tidy, but it's usually enough.